I'm showing
This meeting is being recorded and or transcribed.
I'm showing that it's just a bit past 8:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Today is Tuesday, January 25th, 2022, and I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. This regularly scheduled meeting is taking place in Room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee, with some members participating remotely via Teams. However, we do have a physical quorum of members of the board in the room. The meeting date, time, and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on January 14th, 2022. Karen, I'll ask you to perform a roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Present.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pam Church.
Here.
David Crenshaw.
Here.
Greg Gilbert.
Here.
John Griesbeck.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Present.
Gay Moon. Here. Rob Vance. Larry Elmore.
Present.
Let's see.
Great. Thank you. So we have a physical quorum, and nearly all of our board members are present either physically or via Teams. One of our members is resting his vocal cords on doctor's orders, and so he will be communicating via Teams during the meeting today. I'd like to welcome our newest board member, David Crenshaw. David was appointed in November by Governor Lee to serve a 3-year term as the board's attorney member. And David, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to just say a few words of introduction here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to be a part of this board now and serve this wonderful profession. I'm a native Tennessean from Nashville, Tennessee. Wonderful family, 3 kids, former practicing CPA as well, now attorney member. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us here, David. Thank you. Also would like to offer congratulations to Larry Elmore for his election to the Nasba's Board of Directors as the Southeast Regional Director. We in Tennessee have had a good history of filling that role. His predecessor was also one of our board members, Andy Bonner, and I believe his predecessor was Casey Stewart, also one of our board members. And so we've got a good track record of contributing there. In terms of reminders, just would remind board members that are in the room to use their microphones when speaking and make sure the little red light is on to make sure the mics are picking you up. And please remain on mute unless you are speaking. And also I would like to welcome any other visitors or members of the public that are in the room with us or are watching on the website and the streaming service that we have. With that, we will go ahead to our agenda. The next agenda item is the adoption of Robert's Rules of Order. This is housekeeping method here that we typically adopt at our meeting in January of each year. So is there a motion to adopt Robert's Rules of Order to govern the manner in which our meetings are conducted?
So moved.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, then we will be calling roll because we have some members physically present and others remote. So, Karen, I'll ask you to call the roll.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
If you are there, we cannot hear you.
Aye.
Perfect. David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert. Aye. John Griesbeck. Aye. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Okay. Thank you. The motion passes. The next action item on the agenda is to actually review and adopt the agenda for today's meeting, which was previously noticed. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Robert. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion with respect to the agenda? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Votes aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. The next action item for the board is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of October 21st, 2021. I'll entertain a motion in a second, and then we'll open it up for any discussion or corrections.
Chairman, I move that the minutes be adopted.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Gay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the minutes? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Aye.
Great. That motion passes. Just a little scheduling here. We're going to go ahead with Wendy's Executive Director's report, which will take a few minutes. And then because of the publication notices for our rulemaking hearing and the fact that a court reporter has to kind of set up his or her gear for that rulemaking hearing, once Wendy's Executive Director report is done, and we will have one action item that we'll need to vote on with respect to meeting dates for that. Then we will probably give time for the court reporter to get set up and then try to start the public rulemaking hearing as close to 9 a.m. as posted or noticed as we can. So, Wendy, I'll turn it over to you for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all should have received my report in advance. And as typical, we start off with future meeting dates. You'll see the ones, 4 meetings there already approved by the board, and a last one proposed for May 2nd, Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. And we'll get a motion for that at the end of the report. Nasba held their annual meeting on November 2nd and 3rd virtually this year. And it attracted a record attendance of 519 state board representatives and stakeholders. So that was a record number, and I know many of you attended. So it was a good update from Nasba. Some of the topics discussed included where we are on CPA evolution, the CPA exam and pipeline, diversity, equity, and inclusion, peer review resources for boards, and an internship program developed by EY. And for those of you who sat in, probably saw that as pretty interesting. It may be available for viewing if you missed that, but I thought it was an interesting presentation and how they're helping individuals meet the 150 hours to become licensed within their own organization. So interesting there. Ken Bishop addressed the group as he typically does and gave updates from Nasba in general, and really concluded by emphasizing the significance of the CPA pipeline and doing what we can across the profession to make that a high priority. So later in the meeting today, Larry has given me an update from Nasba Board of Directors, so I'll go into some more detail with some of those things then. The upcoming Nasba meetings for 2022 are listed there in the report. Sherry, Maria and I will be attending the Executive Director and Legal Conference in late April in Clearwater. The regional meetings are scheduled in June, the Western in Colorado Springs and the Eastern in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. And then the annual meeting will be the end of October, 1st of November in San Diego. Hopefully, all of these will be in person. The CPA exam, there is a quarterly update from the AICPA Board of Examiners on February 16th. If any of you would like to listen in on that, I'm happy to send you the meeting notice for that. I know some of you have sat in before, but basically it's their VP of exams kind of giving an update on where we are with regard to the exam. And a lot of executive directors attend, and occasionally some board members attend as well and listen in. So it's good information. The CPA exam performance for the third quarter of 21 is attached to my report. I will say the one big thing that jumped out at me in this report specifically was just the number of new candidates was only 129. We're usually somewhere around 160. So it really has dropped to a pretty low level. Unique candidates were at 682. We're usually somewhere between 720 and 800. So we are seeing some of the decline that's being talked about there from a sitting for the exam standpoint. The candidate performance on the CPA exam, I'm sure some of you have seen the communication on this, but it's a performance document that Nasba creates yearly and the universities can purchase to obtain statistical information on how their school performed with regards to the CPA exam. They are pausing the production of that resource due to CPA evolution and the technology behind it, and having to pause that. So as a state, we're still going to get our quarterly updates, but they will not do the full publication until we get through CPA evolution. Renewals, we just ended the bulk of renewal season as licenses expired on 12/31. We did send postcards this year, as I've mentioned before. We also sent a series of email reminders November 16th, December 16th, and January 20th to encourage folks to renew. On January 31st, a $100 late fee will be incurred for those individuals who have still not renewed at that point. On the next page, you'll just kind of see some statistics there on where we are with regard to renewals. I think we're doing well this year. We have 7,218 individuals that have renewed, and we still have around 1,000 there in expired grace that still need to renew, and that's active and inactive licensees. On the firm side, we have 1,686 that have renewed and 143 still in expired grace. I think we're doing really well on the firm side. The difference from the prior year on the firm side was we were not able to get those notices out last year until a little bit later, and I just think firms all around were a little bit late in renewing last year. We did do a newsletter. Our fall-winter newsletter was distributed December 8th, so hopefully you all got that via email. If not, it is available directly on the website, the current issue as well as any past issues. Outreach, fall tends to be a busy time. Tscpa has been kind enough to allow me to tag along to their chapter meetings and give a quick update on board activities, and so you will see there some activities since our last meeting through just this past week, some various things. Kevin and I also did an update for Lipscomb at their annual accounting conference. We did a 2-hour presentation, so I thought that went well. Performance metrics, these again are our internal metrics that the department strives to achieve. We focus on average days to license an individual, and we also focus on how well we can turn around our case and complaint, or our complaints that come in. So the goal for licensing is around 7.2 days, and then our goal is to have 90% of our cases resolved within 180 days of being received. And that typically means that they're presented to the board and the board's made a decision. So from the time we receive it, it's been reviewed, it's been investigated, and it's been presented to the board for a decision on that. So we did drop a little bit in that side. We're still within the goal there. But we had a couple of cases that we kind of were just a day late on at the last meeting. So with us meeting quarterly, sometimes we get to where we were a day or two late on those. Online adoption rate is simply the number of folks that are able to apply for their initial license online. So we have a tremendous support there for doing everything electronically within the profession. So they apply for the licenses online, don't send paper in. So it's more efficient that way. From licensing, the 7.2 days, we do tend to struggle during renewal season a little bit. We also had several technology issues in December, which caused us to have to delay approving some because we didn't receive some of the required summaries of answers and things as they applied. So there are just some different things that happened there that we had to hold on some applications. And the last part of the report is licensing counts. So new licenses issued. This is the good news. Despite the number of folks sitting, we have decent licensing numbers. We issued 689 individual licenses in 2021 and 69 firm permits. That is more than the prior 2 years. So 2019, we had 664. So we were ahead of that in the current year. I do think, just to give you some perspective, about 30% of newly issued licenses are reciprocals. So people moving into the state. And then overall licensing population is down there at the bottom. This does reflect December 31st. So January 1st rather than December 31st because we've got the folks in expired grace. So was representative of folks that still needed to renew. So that's why that number is a little off there from an active license standpoint. That covers it. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on any of the content in the Executive Director's report?
Wendy, this is Pam. Could I make a quick comment?
Sure.
That candidate performance report, I just wanted to emphasize as the education representative on the board, that is used by directors of accounting programs, sometimes for their accreditation reporting and certainly to monitor the performance of their students. So I hate to see that go away. I do know it's a lot of work, and Nasba, I think, is really busy, and everybody over there is working really hard. So probably that's not going to come back. But if there could be any type of data, even on a summary basis, maybe sent regularly to our schools, that might be helpful. And then I also want to reiterate that I think our profession should be publishing first-time all four-part pass rates. And I think as a profession, as we see our numbers diminishing some, we've got to collect and communicate the data so that we can all work together to strengthen our professions.
Pam, would it be helpful, so the summary that's included in the Executive Director's report, is that something that you think would be helpful to educators around the state? It doesn't focus on a specific school, but it does give Tennessee numbers.
I really do. I really do. I know it's not going to help them perhaps, but, as they hear back from their students, they could be able to say, well, here's what happened at a statewide level. I think it could be helpful, yes.
Thank you, Pam. Also, one other note I'll just mention, Larry Elmore informed of us of this, and we actually got a chance to see the link of it, but our Executive Director, Wendy Garvin, was highlighted in one of the Nasba publications here with respect to profiling Executive Directors from around the country. And so, Wendy, we're proud of that, and also very thankful for the hard work that you do for the Board of Accountancy, as well as with your peers throughout the nation through the Nasba network. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments with respect to the Executive Director's report? Hearing none, I'm showing that we've got about 10 minutes till 9, and so what I would like to do, if I may, is go ahead and invite the court reporter to begin setting up. And while for the public hearing, and while the court reporter is doing that with the board's permission, I thought maybe we could go ahead and deal with the either the legislative update, Maria, or the Nazma committee updates at this time.
Mr. Chairman, before we move forward, can we get a vote on?
Oh, thank you for reminding me. We surely may. So we do have one action item, and that is to approve the new proposed meeting date for the Board of Accountancy meeting on Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. Thank you, Wendy, for that reminder. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the new proposed meeting date of Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 for the Board of Accountancy. Is there any further discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck, Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Rob Vance, Larry Elmore. Larry says aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. And Wendy, thank you for the reminder on that. Why don't we go ahead and I think we have a few minutes here. We can't really start the public rulemaking hearing before 9 a.m. Due to the public notice requirements. So why don't we just go ahead and try to pull forward on the agenda from our Nasba updates. And we'll start with our Nazma Committee updates. Andy, I'll begin with you. I believe you are now on NASBA's Finance and Administrative Committee, which is probably one of the most significant, internal core function committees of NASBA. If you have anything to report from that committee's activities, that would be welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to say that I was just amazed at the financial commitment that NASBA is making with the Gateway 3 program. They're scheduled to have in excess of $4 million spent this year and working on the just building the foundation of Gateway 3. The Gateway 3 proposal in its entirety comes up over $13 million before we start in January of 2024. The report that they gave us as they went through that indicated that the staff was very focused on that hard mark of CPA evolution, and that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and really talked about the not only the urgency of it, but how hard it is in a virtual environment to put together such a program that their directors meet and go through the process weekly updates. And made me just kind of think about what a great job our staff does, quite frankly, in the virtual environment and the things that they're doing and the lessons. And of course, if you read the ED article that Wendy was in, she talked about that too. And it just brought to mind, that, hey, we really need to be thankful sometimes for our staff and what they're doing and really what they're overcoming in this new world that we kind of live in. They talked about a lot of requests at NASBA to get data dumps from the gateway system, and they kind of indicated that the system was never built for that. They're going to, in the redesign process, they're looking into reporting issues, and so there seems to be a lot of emphasis in that area right now, specifically with when you talk about the sitting for the exam. One of the things that we saw was that as far as just revenue related to the exam, because really the exam's set up to where NASBA pays for it in conjunction with Aicpa. They build it and then they pay it back over a time period. This new Gateway 3.0 will be paid back over till 2039. But as far as just revenue coming in from the exam, the revenue was up, but it was international sitting that caused the revenue to be up, which was interesting. As Wendy reported earlier, we have been seeing a reduction of people sitting for the exam, and that's a concern. I think that Prometric and NASBA are going out and trying to send, they're going to start trying to send out notices that saying, hey, your section's supposed to expire. Be sure and, register back so that you can keep your credit. And they're also looking to see why people are dropping out of sitting for the CPA. They've got a committee together and they're looking at that and kind of going heavy in that area. Let's see what else. They're having a lot of no-shows for the exam. I guess the stress of everything going on, the people aren't canceling, they're just not showing up after they pay for it, and then they're coming back in and sitting again. I thought that was interesting. Seems to be just overall the financial condition of Nasba is in good shape. They're ahead of budget right now, and it was a very informative meeting. And it was exciting to see where the investments are at Nasba, and what a great job that the investment committee and also the advisors to the investment committee are doing in this unique interest rate environment that we're in. And I think that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any questions for Andy on the Finance and Administration Committee report?
Kevin?
Yes.
Confirm with Andy. So the gateway system is their primary source for candidate files. That's where they house all of that. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Because NASBA approves our candidates to sit, we don't regularly access it as a board. I know many board staff do because they authorize their own individuals. But I just wanted to clarify for the group what the gateway system was.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm showing about 3 minutes until 9, so I think we have time possibly for at least one more committee report. And Janet Booker Davis, you serve on NASBA's nominating committee. Are there any updates with respect to that you'd like to share?
I do not have any updates since our last meeting. We have finished our work with the vice chair and board of director appointees, and they were reviewed at the last annual meeting. So I don't expect us to have any further meetings until later this spring.
Okay, thank you, Janet. And then, Pam, I believe you're serving on the computer-based testing committee. Any updates with respect to that?
She may be on mute.
Pam, if
You're right. I am so
there
sorry.
We go.
I'm just talking away. Okay, so yes, we talked about, of course, the transition to the CPA evolution. We talked about and I don't think there's anything new to report there. Some of the specifics still have to be communicated. There's not a firm date about that as far as the evolution transition plans. We did talk about the difficulty that a lot of international candidates are having in sitting, and the quarantine provisions and just restrictions that they face when they try to do that. One issue is that they'd love to see some standardization of when the 18 months of retention begin. Is it the score release date or the date of sitting? And that does differ by state. They're trying, of course, one of the goals of NASBA is to standardize in many areas, but that's one that creates problems for candidates. They did talk about the CPA candidate performance report, and Patricia Hartman said she definitely has heard back from some people who were not happy with that decision, but that it was very necessary at this time. And I think that's all. And perhaps at a later point, Kevin, I did attend virtually the AICPA NASBA Educators Conference on CPA evolution. If you'd like me to cover that at some point, if we need to start our hearing.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Yeah, I think we should go ahead and start our hearing. It's right at 9 o'clock, but what I would propose that we do is we'll go ahead and complete the rulemaking hearing and then return right back to just go ahead and complete the NASBA update and committee report. So we'll return to that, Pam, following the public rulemaking hearing. Thank you. And with that, we will go ahead and prepare to commence the public rulemaking hearing that we have. And Maria, if I may, I'll turn things over to you here to kind of walk us through the procedure.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, let me make sure. Okay, we are good to go. This rulemaking hearing is called to order. My name is Maria Bush. I serve as Associate General Counsel in the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Division of Regulatory Boards, and I represent the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. Ms. Garvin, would you please introduce yourself and do a roll call of the board members present today?
Thanks, Maria. Wendy Garvin, Executive Director of the Board, and I will do a roll call of those present today. Andy Bonner.
Present.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pam Church.
Here.
David Crenshaw.
Here.
Greg Gilbert.
Present.
John Griesbeck. Kevin Monroe.
Present.
Gay Moon.
Present.
Rob Vance.
Present.
Larry Elmore. He indicates he.
Thank you. Today is Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. This rulemaking hearing is taking place pursuant to Tscpa 45204. The purpose of this rulemaking hearing is to solicit comments on proposed rules. Now I'll just provide a summary of the rules. The proposed changes pertain to educational requirements for individuals wishing to enter the CPA profession and have been created to encourage uniformity among the 55 U.S. jurisdictions. Proposed revisions include recognition of accrediting organizations by the board, description of what qualifies as accounting education, and the addition of course content in areas such as digital acumen and data analytics. The current rule lists outdated accreditation entity titles. The United States Department of Education eliminated its reference to regional and national accrediting entities with its November 2019 regulation amendments. The new term used in the federal regulations is accrediting agencies. This proposed amendment removes the reference to regional accrediting agencies. Further, the names of the accrediting agencies are updated to reflect their current names. This amendment adds language from the Uniform Accountancy Act model rules published by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, specifying acceptable accounting and general business education courses. Lastly, this amendment adopts language that reflects current board practices surrounding acceptance of lower division level courses. The amendment states that lower division level courses, including those completed at junior college, that transfer to a four-year degree granting institution as upper level division may be counted as upper division level provided the transfer credits are listed on an official transcript from the four-year degree granting institution. A rule is defined as an agency statement of general applicability that implements or prescribes law or policy or describes the procedures or practice requirements of the agency. Proposed rules are filed with the Office of the Secretary of State. Notice is given to the public for comment and a rulemaking hearing is held, as we are doing today. Upon conclusion of the hearing and adoption of the proposed rules, the rules are forwarded to the Attorney General's office for review of legality. If approved, they are filed with the Secretary of State, which is responsible for publication, and the Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly. The rules must stay in the Secretary of State's office for 90 days, and at the end of that time period, they will be effective. Okay, so for the public comment portion of this hearing, I provided a sign-in sheet at the back as well as copies of the rule for any of the public members here today, but it doesn't look like we have any. The notice of rulemaking hearing included, which was published on the Secretary of State's website, included the entire text of the proposed rules and was published on the Tennessee Administrative Register website September 29th, 2021. And again, just reading from my notes, as the agency hears public comments on the proposed rules, I reserve the right to limit such comments if they become repetitive. And so, because I don't see anybody here, but there are people probably online that would like to comment, so we will give the opportunity after I summarize the rules for anyone online to give feedback as well. So, at this time, I'm just going to read each rule number and give a synopsis of what that rule does. 0020-02-.01, recognize colleges and universities, is amended so to reflect the updated accrediting agencies. The reference to regional accrediting agencies is removed. So this updates to A through H. In subsection 3 of this rule, the accredited institutions of post-secondary education is removed. That reference is removed. And throughout this rule, we updated a language that is just gender neutral, so applicant rather than his alone. So we took out references to that. Moving on to the education rule, this is 0020-02-.02. We've added a list in 1A, 1 through 18, and this is a list of courses that qualify as accounting education. These are adopted from, as listed earlier, the uniform rules published by Nasba. And in subsection B of that rule, if a course is not listed in 1 through 18 above, then this language gives the board discretion to approve certain courses. And then it lists 3 factors that help the board determine if a course will qualify as accounting education. In subsection D, ethics on section 5 is updated to state that ethics is accepted as a business course. And then 10 and 11 reference data analytics, data interrogation techniques, and digital acumen. And 3 is a portion we talked about that clarifies lower division level courses will qualify as long as they are listed on the transcript that is published by the 4-year degree granting institution. So that is the sum of those changes. I solicited comments via email for this rule, and I did not receive any. Ms. Garvin, were any written comments received by the board office regarding these rules?
No, we have not received any in the board office.
Thank you. And since there are no audience members physically present, I will ask that if anyone on Teams who has joined, if you would like to comment on this rule, we can do that at this time. You can either type in the chat function or just unmute yourselves. Seeing none. Lastly, is there any comment from the board members on this rule?
Yeah, this is really a rule that the board has previously approved, but we have to go through the process of the rulemaking procedures outlined by statutory code in Tennessee. But even so, if there are any comments at this time that any board members would like to make, they're welcome to do so.
Great, thank you. That means we wrote a really great rule then, because we don't have to change it. So, so lastly, there are several measures I need to adopt by motion and roll call vote as required by Tscpa 45222. So first, we need to adopt the hearing rule language as published. And because there were no amendments today, we will just need to adopt the language as is. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Well, should we have a motion?
Motion, yes. Sorry, thank you.
Is there a motion with respect to adopting the proposed rulemaking language?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye. Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry says aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we need to adopt the Regulatory Flexibility Addendum as well as the Economic Impact Statement, and I'll just read those two brief statements into the record. Pursuant to TCA 45401 through 45404, prior to initiating the rulemaking process, all agencies shall conduct a review of whether a proposed rule affects small businesses. The proposed rules do not affect small businesses directly. The rule amendment updates education language. The board foresees minimal, if any, impact to consumers with the promulgation of the proposed rules. An exemption for small businesses would not be beneficial. For the impact on local government statement pursuant to TCA 45228, the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy foresees no impact on any local governments. So if we can get a motion and roll call vote.
Okay, and Maria, specifically, the motion should be with respect to the adoption or the
Regulatory Flexibility Addendum as well as the Economic Impact Statement.
Okay, we can have a motion to adopt those two items.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a second. Thank you. Is there any further discussion with respect to those two items? If not, will you please call the roll, Karen?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert, John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry says aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Lastly, I provided you all with the document titled Additional Information Required by the Joint Government Operations Committee, and that is just basically a sum of what the rules do and an explanation. I covered that at the beginning of the hearing. So we don't have to go through that, but I do need I'm happy to answer any questions on that before, but if you all would do a motion and roll call vote to adopt the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Is there a motion?
I so moved.
So moved.
We have a motion, and Andy, can we take you for a second, please?
Yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the additional information required by the Joint Government Operations Committee summary document? Hearing none. Wendy?
Mr. Chairman, a minor thought, and we can see what Maria thinks on this. In Part A, in the third paragraph, we talk about the amendment will add language to the UA from the UAA model rules published by Nasba specifying applicable accounting and general business education courses. It's actually subject matter content, not courses.
Okay.
Do you remember how we made some changes to that wording? And there's concern about how different that is, a course versus subject matter content.
Okay. That will be noted. And
if everyone's okay with that, if we're up for discussion.
Yeah, I think what we will do on that, since we've got a motion and a second on the document as is, we'll just treat that as an amendment and deal with the amendment separately and then go back to the main motion if that's all right with everybody. So effectively, I'm looking for a motion to approve the amended language as suggested by Wendy for the third paragraph of Section A of the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee to read as amended and general business education subject matter content as opposed to business education courses. So is there a motion to approve that amended language?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion on the amendment itself? That's what we'll be voting on presently, and then we'll move to the main motion. Hearing none, we will call the vote with respect to the amendment only, which is eliminating the word courses and substituting the phrase subject matter content from the third paragraph of section A.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck, Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance, Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Okay, thank you. That amendment passes. So now we're back to the main motion on the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee document as amended. We have a motion and a second on the floor. So is there any further discussion with respect to this motion to approve the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee as amended? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert, John Griesbeck, Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Okay, the motion passes.
Great, thank you. That concludes the rulemaking hearing. Thank you all for your patience during that process. And after this hearing, the rule will be filed on filing form SS 7039 and submitted to the Attorney General's office for review and approval. And once we get approval from the Attorney General's office, these rules will be filed with the Secretary of State and held for 90 days, at which point they become effective pending approval by the legislator.
Okay, thank you, Maria, and also thank you to our court reporter for documenting this auspicious occasion. Here, I appreciate that very much. My father was a court reporter, so I have a lot of appreciation for what court reporters do, so thank you. So that takes care of the rulemaking hearing. And what I'd like to do, if the board's comfortable with this, is go ahead and finish off our Nasba update section, since we were smack in the middle of that when we were commencing the rulemaking hearing. And Pam, if you're ready, if we could come back to you for any comments you had with respect to the Aicpa Educators Conference that you were alluding to earlier.
Yes, this was a joint meeting for professors, for the educational representatives from each board, held by Aicpa Nasba. And we talked about a lot of different things. I'm struck by how much what we just did in that rulemaking, how much of this material it addressed. So we discussed whether it's better to have, or whether states have specific courses required or broader totals, more like what we have. We were encouraged to think about whether we are going to count analytics as accounting and what specifics we would look at, and we have certainly talked about that. Some states are counting any analytics course that teaches analytics rather than just the tools like Tableau, but others look at whether they're using accounting data, et cetera. They specified that, of course, the accreditation boards have changed and that rules might need to be altered to fit that, as we have done. And one issue we talked about at length was counting community college credit, community college courses. Some states do allow them to count as upper division courses, as we just heard. To a certain extent, we're leaving that up to school, so that if they've accepted it into as upper division at that school, the 4-year school, it would count. But some states, if it says intermediate accounting 2, then it doesn't matter where it's offered, it's going to count as upper division. Another issue that I've heard about for a couple of years now is what the CPA evolution does as far as cost managerial, because it is de-emphasized. Some schools are almost omitting it. Others are turning it into analytics. My personal view is, why can't you do both even in the same course? And then there was something called, there are courses called CPA credit. There are multiple websites where essentially a person goes on and takes an online course, and these course sites are partnering with various schools. So they wanted boards to know that when they show up on the transcript, it looks as if they were taken through that school, but there's sort of one step of removal. And so I don't know if that's something we should consider or not. But in summary, I would say I was struck by how fortunate we are to have people who are so connected to current developments, and that would be Wendy and Kevin and Andy and Larry and everybody on committees. But I felt like we were on top of most of these things. I will add a final note. The woman who held it was from Virginia, and she's one that I was able to talk to recently about what they've done. And they're not seeing the same decreases in sitting for the CPA exam. So I thought that was interesting. And that's it.
Thank you, Pam. That is interesting. Are there any questions or comments for Pam with respect to her report out?
I've got one question. Pam, in several committees I've been on, and even in the A&F committee, there were some conversations about how small colleges were having troubles kind of changing and adapting the new curriculum that everything's kind of focused on. I know that you come from a small college, and I know that you've been very active, and I want to applaud you and the State Society and also Wendy and the State Board for being involved and getting the word out. But it seemed like some of the other states were very concerned, I should say, about the smaller institutions and their ability to adapt.
I'm glad you brought that up, Andy. We certainly touched on that in this meeting as well. And the woman from Virginia's done all sorts of surveys. Nadia Rogers is her name, and Kevin, when I was on the panel that you chaired for Tennessee Society of Accounting Educators, she's one that I spoke with. They have done national surveys of state boards, and they have so much good data. And she talked about this, that small schools certainly may just be able to target one of the disciplines rather than all three. She said that they talked about sort of creative ways to do instruction. So that if you didn't have a person who felt like maybe they were an expert in data analytics, that certainly you could hire an adjunct, you could team up with a larger school, et cetera. And that's a sore point with schools. I mean, I've been at Rhodes, and now I'm at CBU, and I've seen how they deal with these things. And certainly specialists as adjuncts are one way to go. When we started down this path, I was very afraid that small schools would get pushed out. And years ago, there was talk about specifically trying to focus more on one or two large schools to do the certification preparation and not have small schools involved. And I personally think that'd be a loss. So there was no talk about that. There was quite a bit of talk about how they can deal with it. And I think that the consensus is that many will simply focus on the broader accounting rather than data analytics and tax.
Thank you, Pam. And I know, I think I can speak for all of us. We are very blessed to have your accounting educator perspective on the board for these years, and not only on our board, but also with respect to the committees. And I know that your students, both currently and in the past, have been blessed to have you as one of their professors. So, Pam, I appreciate that update very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
let's see, I think we have one other NASBA committee that I've at least got noted down, which is the kind of the mysteriously sounding Regulatory Response Committee. And I think that John and Greg and I serve on that committee. But John or Greg, any comments or updates with respect to that activity?
Be glad to. I believe Greg actually serves on the Ethics Committee.
Sorry about that. Okay.
But we've had some joint doings. As you know, organizations such as PCAOB, AICPA, International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board periodically issue exposure drafts and on amendments and new standards. And so they routinely ask for letters of comment from organizations, large firms, AICPA, Nasba historically has responded to these. And so the Regulatory Response Committee is charged with the role or function of reviewing these, drafting the comment letters in response to them, making suggestions. I joined the committee for the first time this year, and I believe, Mr. Chairman, you also. It's an extremely knowledgeable and experienced committee, myself excluded, I guess, but some really talented people, the Auditing Standards Board chair, several former chairs of NASBA, so like I said, just a lot of experienced folks have done this. It's a busy committee. Since November, we have had, I counted 6 Zoom calls. The 6th one was actually yesterday that Mr. Chairman and I missed as a result of our committee meetings here. But they're generally an hour to an hour and a half to discuss the comments that are going to be made. Some of them have arisen from from PEAK. Some have come from PCAOB. One recently, as I mentioned, was the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board. We considered a number of things, 7 issues, I think, so far. 5 final letters have been issued. And so really, we're the last stop, I guess you would say, before it goes to the chair and president of NASBA for their signature. So just a flavor, with PEAK, it was Mr. Gilbert had mentioned at our last meeting, I think, in his role on the Ethics Committee, the implementation new standard related to, or interpretation related to unpaid fees, also implementing accounting standards, the role of the practitioner in being able to do that. From an independent standpoint, there's been some SARS issues related to quality management. One interesting one, the first one was PCAOB related to supervision of audits involving other auditors, and also a proposed standard dividing responsibility for the audit with another accounting firm. And so some fairly meaty issues for sure. It's painstakingly gone through pretty much word for word, and I think very well drafted comments. I think the thing I've realized probably is just the regulatory nature that we take on this committee on behalf of NASBA to protect the public interest. This is not about what makes it easier for a practitioner or a lot of times, but are we protecting the public interest? And so it's been an educational process for sure for the last couple of months. I look forward to further service here and would appreciate any further comments, Mr. Chairman, you'd make from your role.
You did a great job, John, of summarizing or synopsizing the committee's work, and we're blessed because we get to stand in pretty tall corn with the other members of those of that particular committee. They many are retired, but many have a lifetime of legacy of service and standard-setting roles, and so it's really a fascinating and interesting committee to participate in, and I learn a lot. It just is an honor to serve with you and the other members of that committee. And Greg, I'll turn it over to you here with respect to the Ethics Committee update.
I believe the Ethics Committee has not met since our last Tennessee Board of Accountancy meeting, although the Ethics Committee did meet yesterday along with your committee, and the 3 of us could not participate because we were at our committee meetings with the Tennessee Board of Accountancy, but we reviewed a lot of pretty much all the exposure drafts, and then provide a draft letter that then goes to your committee for approval. So I think John summarized it extremely well, the work that we've done at this point.
Thank you, Greg. And then also, I believe that Larry has presented some comments for Wendy to share with us from his perspective from the Nasba Board of Directors, as well as I think the UAA work that he's doing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Larry, feel free to add to the chat if I mess up in any way, but he did provide me a summary to read to you all, and we can chat if we need to. This first one I'm going to do is the UAA Committee first because it's shorter. The UAA Committee met virtually on January 7th, so earlier this month. The topics covered included noncompliance with laws and rules, better known as NOCLAR. The Accounting Standards Board and PEAK will be voting in February on the language in their exposure drafts. In October 2021, it had already been agreed by NASBA and the NASBA, Aicpa and NASBA UAA that a joint task force would discuss Section 18 confidential communications related to NOCLAR to make any needed changes. It was agreed that members support NOCLAR, especially in regard to successor predecessor communications being required. I will add that Sherry's on the line, I think, today, but she does try to sit in on the PEAK meetings as well to kind of stay up to date on what's happening on that side as well. And I know NOCLAR has been a conversation for actually a number of years, so so good to see it circling around. The second item here from the UAA Committee is work experiences as it relates to signing of audit reports. This is an issue that continues to be an issue and needs to be addressed. I will say in Tennessee, we are the exception. We do have a requirement that you have 2 years of experience before you can sign an attest engagement. So we are a little ahead of everybody else with regard to requirement. Some states don't have any requirement for that. So it is an issue that I keep seeing brought up, though. Number 3 on his document here is principal place of business, which UAA defines as the office location designated by the licensee for purposes of substantial equivalency and reciprocity. This topic has gotten a lot of attention recently due to remote work during the COVID period. And I will add to this, we are getting calls to the office trying to clarify principal place of business, where do I need to be licensed? I'm working in Tennessee at my home, but I work for a company in North Carolina, things like that. So it has been a conversation on our monthly calls with executive directors, so it is getting some attention on whether we need some more specific wording there to help people interpret that better. Number 4 on his list here is barriers to practice in the anti-regulatory environment, and he doesn't have additional information on that, but of course the anti-regulatory environment is being reviewed by multiple parties. The NOCLAR Joint Task Force will meet again in early February, and the UAA Committee will meet again sometime later this spring. So that's UAA Committee, if anybody has any questions on that. And then lastly, Larry is serving as the regional director on NASBA's board of directors, and this is a pretty extensive report, but I will try to get through it. They did meet on January 17th and 18th, so just last week in Key West, Florida. Larry says, unfortunately, he had to attend virtually. The first day of the meeting for those of us who are regional directors was a meeting with the Nazma Committee on Relations with member boards. This committee is charged with providing reciprocal communications between state boards of accountancy and NASBA Board of Directors. The committee welcomed 3 new regional directors, Nancy Corrigan from the Pacific region, Michael Schmitz from the Central region, and of course Larry from the Southeast. A significant part of our meeting was spent discussing topics which were brought up and documented at the NASBA annual meeting, regional breakout sessions, with updates from each region on any new issues that have come up since. It was interesting, Larry notes, to see how similar the issues were across all the regions. The committee had an opportunity to meet with the executive committee to discuss current hot topics, some of which included recent high turnover in the state board executive director positions across the country. So there are a lot of folks retiring and a lot of new folks in my role across the country. CPA exam and pipeline issues, status of the evolution project, which is on schedule, and accounting curriculum educator concerns, which we've highlighted today. We also heard from John Johnson, NASBA's Director of Legislative and Governmental Affairs, who updated the committee on recent upcoming legislative matters, which are in full force. Time was spent planning recommendations for topics and speakers at the regional meetings this summer. The next quarterly regional conference calls with executive directors and board members from each state will be held in February. Specific dates are to be determined by each region, and once again, the focus questions will be sent out to attendees in advance to encourage more participation. These meetings are scheduled to move from 1 hour, as in the past, to an hour and a half to allow for some more detailed discussions. And the meeting was adjourned a little early due to a carbon monoxide alarm going off in the meeting room. And they met on the patio. The board meeting, which was the second day of the meeting, consisted of an all-day NASBA Board of Directors meeting with key topics discussed below. They were reminded that key executives from NASBA are always willing and eager to meet with state boards at any time, including attending their board meetings and or dinner afterwards. So if any of you would like to hear from someone at NASBA, we can certainly invite them along on any specific topic you'd like to hear about. The regional annual meetings in 2022 are still planned to be live at the current time, but committee meetings will continue to be virtual through the end of March. The next NASBA Aicpa Joint Summit will be in February 2022. Colleen and Ken will meet with Barry Melanson from the Aicpa prior to the meeting to prepare and facilitate topics. NASBA is in the midst of the major IT upgrade and will be subject to SOC 2 in 2022. The current pause in publication of the candidate performance exam statistics is due to time demands related to evolution and other projects, plus the above mentioned IT work. Getting those reports out is very labor intensive, which we have discussed today to some extent. Evolution project is going well and is on schedule. NASBA plans to ramp up communication to exam candidates this year. Pipeline continues to be a big issue concern, with several ideas being considered to not only attract candidates, but keep them interested. Ken Absek is my counterpart in Idaho. He's the chair of the Executive Directors Committee. Also was commended for his work with executive directors. He's implemented a mentoring project. We have regular monthly calls. He helped with NASBA University, etc. He has done a lot of work for us across the country. Mobility, principal place of business, reciprocity issues, which I mentioned from his Uaa Committee update. The new EY internship program, which they talked about at the annual meeting, appears to have been discussed again. Again, 150 versus 120 hour rule continues to be brought up by some. NASBA continues to encourage diversity on all boards and committees. The Diversity Committee discussed several ways and ideas they're pursuing to accomplish for more diversity and inclusion. Alfonso Alexandra from the Center for Public Trust reminded everyone that their golf tournament will be held this year, March 28th, here in Nashville at the Governor's Club. Everyone is welcome and encouraged to participate. This is a major fundraiser for the group, for the Center for Public Trust. And Larry just made a comment here that there were a lot of other items discussed as well. It was obvious to him that the executive team and NASBA is very open-minded, receptive to open communications and new, fresh ideas. And that concludes.
Thank you, Wendy, and especially Larry, thank you for so diligently and faithfully representing the activities on the Uaa Committee as well as now on the NASBA Board of Directors. We are very blessed by your willingness to serve, and that's not an easy, lightweight task at all. And so, Larry, we appreciate that, and we also look forward to the day when you can unrest your vocal cords and be with us in person here, and I hope that will be soon. So thank you very much, Larry. Any other board member comments with respect to Larry's report out? Okay, I think that walks us through the NASBA update section. And so what I'd like to do, if the board is comfortable, is go back to the agenda in normal order. The next item on the agenda is the reactivation application. This is the first of two presentations under our processes for dealing with a suspended license where the person has requested reinstatement. And for this one, I will turn it over to Wendy and or Maria to set this up for us.
I can start. So Ms. Sherwinski's license is currently suspended as the result of an agreed order back in 2018. She is submitting an application to reinstate that suspended license in accordance with our rule for the reinstatement of revoked and suspended licenses. She has included her application, she has paid her fee, and as is normal when your license is suspended, you also have to renew that license biannually, is that the right word? Along with meeting your continuing professional education requirements. So she has done that as well. So as staff, we have found that the application is complete. Part of the requirement in the agreed order was that she could apply for reinstatement once her probation or federal probation had ended. We have received confirmation that that federal probation has ended. So legal has reviewed this, and we both feel that the application is complete. And I believe the board would be charged today with determining whether you feel like the application is complete and whether you would like her present at the next meeting to answer questions to make a decision on the reinstatement request.
Thank you, Wendy. Just to emphasize, we will not be making a decision on actual reinstatement at this meeting. This is the first of two meetings under our processes, but we need to determine whether or not we believe and accept that the application for reinstatement is complete, and then we need to decide whether we would like to have Ms. Zerwinski present either virtually or in person for the next meeting, where we will actually make a decision on reinstatement. And so I guess what I would recommend that we do is we first entertain a motion as to whether we accept that the application for reinstatement is complete and deal with that element of it, and then have discussion as to the board's preferences for whether we would like or believe that it is necessary for Ms. Zerwinski to be in appearance at the next meeting. She certainly would have the right to, that's at her discretion, but if we would like her to, it is also within the board's discretion to request that she be present. So if I can ask for a motion to accept that the reinstatement application as submitted by Ms. Zerwinski is complete.
So move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Thank you, Andy. Is there any discussion as to that aspect of things with respect to the completeness of her reinstatement application? Hearing none, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on that motion.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance, Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. I think the next issue that the board needs to weigh in on here is whether we would like for Ms. Zerwinski to basically appear either virtually or in person at the next board meeting, where we will actually discuss and decide upon reinstatement. Frequently there are questions for the person who is soliciting reinstatement, so it's often helpful to have them there. And so the question would be, is that the desire of the board to do so? And then we can communicate that to the candidate. And if so, would virtual appearance be satisfactory in addition to personal appearance, if that is permitted? And Maria, I'm assuming that either form would be permissible. Okay. So, and she is always welcome to show up, even if we don't require it, because I mean it's her reinstatement license, it's a reinstatement application that's being considered, so she has a right to be present in person. This is really an issue of whether the board would require that essentially as a condition for reinstatement.
Mr. Chairman, Larry has suggested that she attend either live or virtually.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Ray, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say one consideration the board might want to discuss is having, because I've seen this in other reinstatement processes for this board and other boards, but any proof of community involvement, rehabilitation, those types of things to demonstrate how she has recovered from what happened. And then that way she could be prepared. So if we discuss and ask that right now, it might be good for her to be, prepared to present those things to the board.
Okay. Board members, would y'all like to weigh in terms of your preferences as to whether we would essentially require her to appear either virtually or in person? And if so, in addition to her application, what we'd like her to be prepared for to discuss?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Larry. I think an appearance would be great, either virtually or in person. I think a good point was brought up on the respondent's statement about being charged or never being charged but pleading guilty, and so further clarification on that might be helpful.
Thank you, David. Any other questions or comments on that? Just from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a consensus that we would like to have her appear either virtually or in person. And Maria, I think you make some fair points with respect to just advising her that she should be prepared to, address the issues that were in the action that resulted in her suspension, as well as remedial activities that she may have undertaken since then to kind of show that she's moving in the right direction. I think probably if we're going to basically make that as a condition of reinstatement, we should probably have a motion that we would like her to appear either virtually or in person at the next meeting when her reinstatement application will be considered. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dave. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, David. Is there any further comment or discussion? Hearing none. Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. My watch is showing about 10 minutes until 10 or thereabouts. What I would suggest we do, if the board is comfortable, is we take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, our next item on the agenda will be the peer review update, which will be presented by the Tennessee Society of CPA representatives, who I know several of them have been in our meeting virtually, including Kara, Richard, and Art. And so for you all, our plan is to reconvene at 10 a.m. Here in about 10 minutes, and then we'll move forward with that part of the agenda and the remainder of the agenda. So we're in recess until 10 a.m. Central Time. Is a peer review update by the Tennessee Society of CPAs. And before I turn things over to them, I just want to express appreciation for the role that the Tscpa plays. I mean, it is the integral party here to our peer review process in Tennessee, but also the role that they play more broadly with respect to our profession and all of our practitioners. And so the decades of tremendous work that the Society has put in is just greatly appreciated and acknowledged. And I know that we have several representatives from the Tscpa here with us this morning. And Kara, if I may, or Wendy, if I may, turn it over to you to kick that off here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have Katie Cheek on the phone. She is with Tscpa, and she is their new COO, I believe. Is that correct, Katie?
Yes, that is correct. Wendy, can you hear me okay?
I can. I believe you're going to start the presentation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see you all, even if it's virtually. We appreciate you guys taking the time to have us on today to provide you with a peer review program update. I have a few other of our peer review staff on the call with me today. We have Kara Fitzgerald, who is our CEO and also serves as our program CPA on staff. So she oversees the peer review program. As Wendy said, I'm Katie Cheek. I'm a peer review administrator. I also have Gina Corrado with us today. She's a peer review administrator here. Then we have Art Sparks, who is the program's primary technical reviewer, and Richard Hill, who serves as a backup technical reviewer in addition to volunteering as the peer review committee chair. So getting right into our update, I thought we would take a look at firm enrollment trends. As you can see here, there has been somewhat of a decline in firm enrollment over the last 10 years, 12 years or so. And really, this goes back to around 2010. Some of you may recall that in 2009, 2010, Tscpa absorbed the firms that had been enrolled in the state board's peer review program. When this happened, this created a spike in the number of firms enrolled in the Tscpa program. Since then, it has gone down slightly each year. Currently, there are 566 firms enrolled. The reason that we most often see firms leaving the program, there are several reasons actually. One of them is firm mergers. We tend to see a lot of those, firm sales, and then firms who are opting to perform work or to only perform work that is not subject to peer review. So this was especially common when SARS 21 was released. Many firms who had been doing compilation work decided at that time to just perform preparations of financial statements, which then resulted in their no longer being required to be enrolled in the peer review program. So all of these factors have contributed to the lower number of firms enrolled. As I said, there are 566 enrolled right now. Of those, 46 are no ANA firms, which means they don't have a peer review due date. So these firms are enrolled, but they're not currently performing work subject to peer review. They may choose to remain enrolled because they may plan to perform work in the future that is subject to peer review, so they want to retain that enrollment. These firms are required to complete an annual confirmation to provide assurance as to what type of work they are doing. So if they have decided to start performing compilations or reviews, they're supposed to notify us immediately, but this annual confirmation allows them the opportunity to confirm that for us, so they are required to complete that. Taking a look at the peer review report data, this data relates to reviews accepted in 2021, so this is just for engagement reviews. There were 125 total reviews accepted. There was an 84% pass rate, 12% pass with deficiency, and 4% fail. Then moving over to system reviews, there was a 68% pass rate, 18% pass with deficiency, and 14% fail. So anytime a peer review report is accepted with a pass with deficiency or a fail report, the peer review committee is tasked with assigning corrective action in accordance with peer review program standards. And those corrective actions are specifically designed to help the firm remediate whatever the issues were that were identified during the peer review process. So these are really the most common corrective actions that were accepted last year. Many times CPE may be assigned, and oftentimes if a firm had several issues identified during the course of the peer review committee may assign several different actions. So they may assign just, for example, SARS CPE and Audit CPE and a pre-issuance review and submission of a monitoring report. So these may all tie back to one review or just a handful of reviews that were accepted. These all typically relate to those pass with deficiency or fail review reports. When firms complete these actions, this comes back to the peer review committee or the technical reviewer to review it and accept it to ensure that the actions were performed correctly. The committee does have the option, if they were not performed correctly, to assign additional corrective action to assist the firm in remediation. So COVID-19 impacts. You may remember back in 2020, the Aicpa issued a blanket extension to firms that were enrolled in the program that had peer review or corrective action due dates falling between January 1st and September 30th of 2020. There were no blanket extensions issued after that time. Those firms who received those extensions have moved through the process normally at this point. We do see continued extension requests coming in because obviously effects of the pandemic are still out there and still impacting firms and peer reviewers. So the peer review committee is operating under guidance from the Aicpa and offering reasonable leniency for these requests when they come in. Firms are still required for the most part to submit certain documentation prior to making an extension request. So they must make that request prior to the due date. They must provide completed scheduling information, so they have to have their peer reviewer secured and a date by which they expect to perform the review. That all has to be approved by the Tscpa office. So we are still seeing some of those, but for the most part, firms are working through the process normally. Another change that came about partially as a result of COVID-19 was the approval of off-site system reviews. So going back several years, there was a requirement for system reviews to be performed in person. When COVID-19 came about, the Aicpa offered the option for firms to undergo these off-site system reviews without obtaining prior approval from the administering entity. Obviously, changes in technology have made this a little more easy to do, and the Aicpa Peer Review Board has issued an exposure draft to allow this to be a permanent option for firms to undergo these system reviews off-site without obtaining prior approval. So getting a little bit into the firm non-cooperation process. This is information we've shared with the board before, but I think it's always good to review. First, I will touch on firm drops. So when a firm is dropped from the program, generally speaking, the peer review for that firm has not commenced. So there's something that they have not completed prior to that peer review commencing that was a required action. For example, perhaps they failed to schedule their peer review. Perhaps they didn't respond to the no ANA confirmation that I mentioned earlier. Maybe they didn't pay their peer review administrative fees, which are due annually. Excuse me. When that happens, the firm is notified through a series of letters, through email and certified mail, to let them know that they have an outstanding action due and that they will be dropped from the program if that action is not completed. Once they've received all of those notifications, they're notified that they have 30 days or they will be dropped. When the drop occurs, we do notify the state board that that firm's enrollment status has changed. Similar to a drop is a termination. The termination, the main difference here is that a firm's peer review has commenced. So, for example, a termination may result if a firm has begun the peer review process, but maybe they didn't complete it. They could have failed to provide everything required to the peer reviewer. Another example may be they didn't complete their follow-up. When terminations occur, again, the Tscpa will notify the state board. There are a couple of instances of firm terminations that are a little bit different. It's not that the firm didn't complete something, it's that there may be a larger problem. So, for example, if the firm received 2 or more consecutive non-pass review reports, there's a possibility that firm could face termination. And what happens in that situation is the peer review committee will review the circumstances regarding the firm's peer review history. So they may take a look at the last several reviews, dig into the deficiencies and the different issues that came up, make a determination as to whether or not that firm has completed corrective action. Have they repeated these deficiencies? Are they proving that they are trying to remediate the issues that were identified? If it's determined that they have not cooperated, the peer review committee has the option to vote to refer the firm to the Aicpa. And when that occurs, the Aicpa has the option to conduct a hearing panel comprised of panelists from the peer review board at the AICPA to review the evidence and make a determination as to whether or not that firm's enrollment should be terminated. In most cases, if it's a situation where the firm has not completed something after the peer review has commenced, let's say they didn't complete their corrective action, if they complete that and they desire to re-enroll in the program, they can re-enroll through the Tscpa. If it's a situation where the firm has not, where they have obtained consecutive non-passed reports, or maybe they have failed to correct deficiencies after consecutive corrective actions on the same peer review, if it's a larger issue, those types of reinstatements are required to go back before the AICPA peer review board for reinstatement. And again, anytime a termination occurs, the firm does have a 30-day appeal period after that hearing. If the hearing determines that the firm's enrollment should be terminated, there's a 30-day appeal period for the firm. After that 30-day appeal period has ended, Tscpa and the AICPA, I believe, will notify the state board of that change to their enrollment. This is a look at the drops and terminations that occurred in 2021. So it's more common to see firms dropped from the program. The most common reason has been the firm has failed to schedule their peer review. We had 23 of those last year. We had one firm drop for failure to pay fees, and then 4 dropped for failure to provide required information to their peer reviewer. And then moving down into terminations, there were 4 firms terminated, 3 for failure to complete corrective action, and then 1 terminated for consecutive non-passed peer review reports. I will pause there. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay, I think starting here, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Hill to give us some information on AICPA Oversight.
Thank you and good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with the Board of Accountancy to provide this update. So Katie's got control of the slides. She's going to advance it to the next couple of slides. Talk briefly about the AICPA oversight of the Tscpa's administration of the peer review program. So the Tscpa is one of 26, 27 administering entities throughout the country, and we're subject to the oversight that's performed by the Tscpa. So one of the ways they do that are RAB observations. So Katie, can you move us up a couple of slides?
Observations. Okay. Sorry, Richard. There you go.
If it's still showing, I'm still seeing the drop in termination slide.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. Kara, is that what you see?
No, I'm seeing the RAB observation slide that says 3 of 16 RAB meetings were observed in 2021.
Okay, I'm not paying attention to that screen then. I'll read off my notes. So, there it is. Okay, 3 of 16 RAB observations were observed. So RAB observations are one tool that the AICPA uses to see if an administering entity is administering the program properly. So those are done by and large by the AICPA staff in Durham. They live and breathe these standards. That's their full-time job, and so they're very knowledgeable and very thorough in these RAB observations. So what they're looking for is to see if a RAB is following the peer review program guidance, the standards, and evaluating a review. If we've prepared, if the RAB members seem to have read over the materials and they're ready to discuss them during the meeting, how a RAB mitigates familiarity threat. And so I can't hardly be in a meeting with Art Sparks without talking about familiarity. I think we'll get into that in just a moment. The timeliness and appropriateness of the materials that are provided by the RAB to the administrator. So I chair the group on behalf of the peer review board that reviews all RAB observation reports issued throughout the country, and roughly half, maybe 60% of those have comments in them. So we were one of those in our observation reports. They had a couple of comments. They weren't material non-compliance, had nothing to do with accepting the right type of report. I think the RAB was just going to be a little harder on the firm to get them to do corrective action than standards allowed. So that's fine. We learned from it, and now we've got a new procedure in place that looks for that. On the next slide, familiarity mitigation. Again, I kind of jokingly talk about that. That's been talked about for 6 or 7 years at the peer review board level. So as we say, there's good familiarity and bad familiarity. So good familiarity is that you know a reviewer that struggles with a particular area of performing a peer review. And so when you review that reviewer's work, your skepticism may be a little bit heightened. But all this discussion on this slide is about bad familiarity. That's where a RAB or a tech reviewer may say, well, I know that reviewer and he teaches a lot of courses on this particular subject, so I know he knows what he's talking about. We're just going to not ask these questions or not push back. So to offset that, we as an administering entity are required to adopt a familiarity mitigation policy, and we have one and been told it's one of the better ones throughout the country. So that's how we manage the risk of too much familiarity between the RABs and the reviewers, the RABs and the firms, the tech reviewer and the firms, and the reviewers and the RABs. You know, we're all kind of working in the same area. So we're trying to make sure that we're being as objective as we can. So that policy is reviewed, updated annually. It was most recently updated at our October peer review committee meeting. I do know of at least 2 cases during the year where, to manage familiarity with high volume reviewers, that Katie went outside the state of Tennessee and brought in 2 RAB members solely to look at high volume reviewers' peer review to make sure that the tech reviewer and the RAB, treated them objectively. And that worked, from my understanding. Those outside RAB members didn't have any comments. So we do a lot trying to make sure that we're being objective and that we don't let bad familiarity enter into this. Again, seeing Art on the call, I hear his voice in the back of my head frequently. But anyway, saying, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. Committee members should be held to a higher standard, and high volume reviewers should be held to a higher standard. And I think we do a good job with that. We can't just be just good enough. So I think Art and the committees have done a fine job on that. Let's talk about other oversight procedures that are in place. So every other year, the Aicpa Oversight Task Force sends one of their members in to perform certain administrative oversight procedures. So they're coming in looking at things like timeliness of accepting reviews, monitoring of old reviews and firms that are complying with program standards, how the AE's processes are and their documentation, the tech reviewers' performance, and different things like that. So I did in 2021, did 2 oversight visits, and both those had comments in them. So I'm very pleased to say that Tennessee had no comments in our 2020 visit, which was done by the former chair of the peer review board, Tom Perry. And while he did it remotely, it was probably the most thorough oversight, certainly, that I can remember. Tennessee's got a long history of receiving no comments. Again, that's about half and half. Half the administering entities will get some comment in that oversight report, and about half don't. And so I'm very pleased that Tennessee, for many, many visits, has gotten a report with no comments. Benchmark reporting. This just started back in 2018, and Katie is too modest to tell you this, so I'll tell you this on her behalf. She was on a very small pilot group. I think there were 4 administrating entities throughout the country that, when benchmarking was being created, there was a pilot program, and so Tennessee got to have some voice in that as the benchmark model was created. That was good for us to have that presence there, but it was also good because we knew what was coming. We could be better prepared for it. So we have submitted the benchmarks that are required to be submitted 3 times a year, largely through Prima, the software that Aicpa uses to manage the peer review program. It generates a lot of reports looking at timeliness and things like that. So we're very pleased with our benchmark reporting and how that's done. And that's reviewed by the Oversight Task Force, and then comments are offered back to AEs that need comments on that. Again, by and large, ours have been very clean. Enhanced oversight has been around a while, 2014 as I recall, and again, it was built from scratch. Just as a brief reminder for newer board members, that's a program where a review's done, the reviewer sends in their documents, and then at random, and sometimes targeted, but mostly at random, the Aicpa has selected certain reviews to be subject to enhanced oversight. So when the reviewer sends all their materials in, the Aicpa notifies Katie and says, we've picked this review and we want to look at this, must select engagements, usually a yellow book, single audit, or employee benefit plan. Then the firm sends their work papers to this subject matter expert who's been qualified by the Oversight Task Force. The peer reviewers, or the AE, actually sends the checklist the peer reviewer completed, and a third person goes behind the peer reviewer to see how thoroughly they did their job. So it was a tough program to launch because there'd never been anything like it. And it took us a year or two to kind of work the bugs out, but it has been extraordinarily effective. In year one, for every 5 engagements the subject matter expert determined was non-conforming, peer reviewers identified 1 out of those 5. Not very good, very disappointing. So then the peer review program put in additional training, reminded reviewers, you're there to look at whether they follow the standards. Don't let time pressure get to you. Don't listen to oral enhancements to the work papers. Stick with what's in the work papers. And so the last year, 2019, because it was suspended in 2020, but in 2019, now that's up to, for every 5 the subject matter experts find, peer reviewers are finding 4. So that's dramatic improvement in just a 4 or 5 year period. I don't know that it'll ever get to 100% because I don't know that any 3 peer reviewers would agree exactly on how something should be done. But 80% looks a lot better to me than 20%. And it shows the reviewers' performance has really stepped up in the last few years. So again, not a real popular program initially, but I think people have come to embrace it, and it's been a tremendous help to making sure reviews are performed in accordance with standards. Lastly, I want to mention the Tscpa Oversight. The committee chair, along with Art as our tech reviewer, and Katie and Kara's CPA on staff, and Gina, we look at which reviews and reviewers should be oversighted. We're required to oversight a minimum number of reviews every year. The last 2 or 3 years, as I recall, we've gone beyond that minimum to do more because we want to make sure that we oversight members. And that could be someone from out of state that we don't know. It could be a reviewer that's gotten a lot of feedback. It could be a firm that we're concerned about. And the last several times we've done these, we've actually brought in people from outside the state to do that oversight to, once again, hedge against the familiarity of having a committee member potentially review another committee member. So rather than have that, if we're not comfortable with that, then we'll bring somebody from out of the area in to do that oversight. With both the enhanced oversight and the ones done by the Tscpa, there's a report prepared. It goes to the RAB to consider when the reviews are accepted. So there's a lot of work done to monitor and to oversight the peer review program, and these are just a few of those that are done that way. And then I want to close out our presentation by just talking briefly about the reviewer population monitoring on the final slide. So the Aicpa has done studies because there was concern, back 10 years ago, that there are not enough reviewers to cover the number of peer reviews that need to be done. So at the peer review conference in August of 21, the Aicpa showed a slide that indicated for the next 5 years there appear to be enough reviewers to cover the amount of peer reviews that need to be done. So that's good news. But I hear there are pockets within the country where there aren't enough reviewers, one of those being California, for instance. They have a lot more firms than they have reviewers. So we're mindful of that in Tennessee. We have looked forward and think we're in good shape for the next several years. But despite that, we're still recruiting new peer reviewers. So some of those are within firms of current peer reviewers. It's easy to monitor a junior partner, so to speak. But I'm also working with reviewers in a couple other firms, trying to give them just some practical assistance maybe as they perform their reviews. So we're constantly monitoring the number of reviewers we have to make sure we have enough. And then we're also on the lookout to recruit new peer reviewers to make sure that the program can be sustained as we all get a little bit older and moving toward retirement. So we're pleased with where we stand there. That's all that I had to present. Are there any questions from the board on what I did or what Katie presented earlier?
Rich and Katie, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Wendy?
Have you seen in the past couple of years anyone who was terminated for successive non-pass reports? Have you seen someone successfully re-enter the program? I know Katie said it has to go to the peer review board, but what are they looking for in that situation? Do you know, or have you seen that?
Richard, do you want to speak to that?
I was just getting ready to ask you to do that, but yeah, I actually have firsthand experience with one. One of my peer review clients was terminated for not passing, they didn't pass 2 times in a row and didn't complete corrective action. And so they were allowed back in, provided that they went back and did what they didn't do, which seems very fair to me. If a firm agrees to certain corrective action and then changes their mind and chooses not to do that and they're terminated, well, that doesn't get them out of, no get out of jail free card. They've got to go back in and do those other corrective actions. And so they're kind of let in contingent that they will do all that. And then the RAB will review the results of that tardy corrective action to determine what's next. Have they successfully completed it and they're allowed back in, or are they still struggling and need further corrective action?
And this is Kevin.
So it's happened a couple of times that I'm aware of in Tennessee, and I know it's happened throughout the country.
This is Kevin. One question that I had, over the years, I think there have been some concerns from a board perspective about timely notification of when someone, for example, is dropped from peer review, because that may affect a disciplinary action that we may be considering with respect to a firm or a practitioner. How comfortable are you with the communications and the timeliness of them going back and forth between not only the Tennessee State Board and you all, but the Aicpa and the RAB and so forth? Are you pretty comfortable that that's functioning as you would like it to?
I would say yes to that, Kevin. The Aicpa facilitates the drop process, so they are actually the ones sending each of those drop warning letters through the PRIMA system. So when a firm reaches the end of that letter series and they are dropped, the Aicpa is managing that process. So they're aware of that drop. Tscpa is aware of that drop. And then our staff regularly communicates with the board staff anytime a drop occurs, or a resignation for that matter, or a termination. So anytime a firm's enrollment status is changed, our staff is communicating with board staff. In addition to that, there are some reports and things that the board has access to through the PRIMA system if they wanted to go in and just ensure that they had all of the most current information.
Thank you, Katie. That's most helpful, because I know that we've encountered some situations where it appears that a respondent is serially enrolling and then disenrolling from peer review, almost to try to time it, in such a way as to basically put off peer review. And so I appreciate the commentary on the notifications. Are there any other questions or comments for our representatives from the Tscpa?
Kevin, this is Kara. I might just add, in addition to the drop process, you have firms who go to hearing, which may eventually lead to termination. And there was a period of time in which the Aicpa hearing process was severely delayed, and we were seeing months between Tscpa submitting a firm to go to hearing and the firm ever going before the hearing, before the peer review board at Aicpa. Richard and Katie, I believe that we're seeing huge improvements in that process. AICPA obviously was affected by COVID and being able to get firms through that process, but we are seeing tremendous improvement in firms. The time between when we submit them for hearing and that hearing actually occurring, that's happening much faster than it was a year or two ago.
Thank you, Kara.
That's exactly right. I sit on some hearing panels, and when I first was doing that in 2012 or 13, when I was on the board, there was one meeting a month for a hearing panel, and now I think there are 4, if not 5 meetings a month. And so the AICPA's procedures, fair procedures, not due process, but fair procedures, prescribe certain contacts and timelines and letters and certified letters and all that. And they just got behind, but they're doing much better. I was on a panel the last couple of weeks, and it was, pretty timely. I still think there's always going to be a struggle there, but they're getting them through much more quickly than before. So I could see a regulator sitting up there patting their foot if you're aware of a complaint being filed, and while somebody's still enrolled in peer review, they could be anywhere in that journey to get to a hearing panel to be terminated.
Richard, if I might, the AICPA also changed their process slightly. The process used to be automatic. After 3, you get kicked out, and then they moved that to automatic 2, you get kicked out. Well, what was happening was you would get 2 non-passes in a row and then get kicked out. The firm would go into a hearing, and they would get to the altar of the hearing and say, hey, look what I've done to improve myself. And the AICPA would have to go through the process, but then they would determine the firm had improved. Now they changed the process where we must give them pretty strict corrective action after that second non-pass, and then allow them to either in one pass get better, or if they don't, and we decide that they have not shown improvement, we can then send them on to the AICPA. That's cleared out a lot of the firms being in the pipeline unnecessarily.
Thank you all. I appreciate that clarification, and most of all, just appreciate the overview of the peer review process. I think a lot of the public may not understand how many different quality control steps there are to ensure that the profession is properly serving the public, and the role that the Tscpa plays here in Tennessee with respect to that is hugely significant and greatly appreciated. And so we just thank you all, Katie, Art, Rich, and Kara, and others that are working on these. That's just greatly appreciated, because that's a heavy burden of responsibility. I think of that scene, I guess, from a book, but also from one of the movies, where in Harry Potter, Professor Dumbledore is saying it's tough enough to stand up against one's enemies. It's really tough to stand up to one's friends and tell them, or colleagues, and tell them that they are not doing the job. And that's not an easy task to do, but it is one that is necessary, and one that we appreciate the effort that you all put into doing. Are there any other comments or questions on board members' parts here for this presentation? Thank you all very much for the presentation and the overview, and most particularly for the work that you all are doing with our practitioners. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to present today.
Thank you.
You bet. Y'all have a good week.
Thank you.
Okay, I think the next item that we have on our agenda is with respect to our board committee reports. For those that are watching out in the public that may not have participated in yesterday's committee meetings, the process of the board that we follow is that the committees that we'll be hearing report outs from today, licensing and enforcement, and the executive committee, meet in public session the day before the board meeting. So these committees met yesterday and thoroughly went through the action items that they are dealing with. All board members are allowed to participate and ask questions and discussions in the committees. And so quite a bit of vetting has taken place in our committees yesterday, but still there are action items that will require board action. So we'll begin with our licensing committee, and Pam Church is chairing that committee. And Pam, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. We have 3 items that we have motions for. The first one is a petition for extension of credit for a part of the CPA exam from Logan Dawes. Logan is a student at Middle Tennessee State. He currently has credit for BEC and Audit. His BEC expires March 8th of this year. He requested extension to May 8th, about 8 weeks, due to the fact that his father had a sudden heart attack and was out of town, had to stay out of town for 45 days because of COVID. Logan had to stay with him in that other city, and then 2 weeks when he returned. So 45 days in the hospital, but he stayed with his father, and then 2 more weeks. So he, of course, lost valuable time and had considerable stress. Although he asked for an extension to May 8th, the committee decided that July the 31st would be a more appropriate extension to give him the benefit of his request.
Thank you, Pam. Is there a motion to, and I gather that you just indicated the committee has supported a recommendation to the board for an extension through July 31st. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Is there any further discussion or comment on this committee recommendation for the extension request for Mr. Doris? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert. John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Pam, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, the second item is from Javon Mead, a similar request, a petition for extension. He has credit for REG and BEC. He's requested a 9-week extension for REG. It did expire on January 1st, 2022. And he also has credit for BEC, which expires May 23rd of 2023. He's requesting a 9-week extension on REG due to loss of his professional accounting job from the COVID environment and canceling of his FAR part by Prometric in November 22, again related to COVID. He was informed that that exam was canceled, and when he rescheduled, not only did he have to go to another city, but had a delay in testing because of the rescheduling and a delay in receiving the scores. He asked for a 9-week extension. The committee decided that, again, a July 31st date of extension would be more appropriate to give him the benefit that he seeks.
And Pam, just to clarify, we're talking about the extension of the July 31st date for both REG and BEC. Is that right?
No, one of them is not expiring until 2023.
Okay, so just REG.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to accept the committee's recommendation to extend the credit extension through July 31st for Mr. Mead's REG section, which has expired?
So moved.
We have a motion by Gay. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Are there any comments or questions? Aaron, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe, Lee Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you, Karen. The motion passes. And Pam, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Our third item is that a licensee has requested the board to consider the Certified Government Financial Manager exam for CPE credit. This exam demonstrates competency in governmental accounting, auditing, financial reporting, internal controls, and budgeting at the federal, state, and local level. And this certification is awarded by the National Association of Government Accountants. It is a three-part exam. The first part, government environment. The proposed technical field of study would be specialized knowledge. Exam 2, governmental accounting, financial reporting, and budgeting. The proposed field of study is governmental accounting. And the third is governmental financial management and control. And the proposed technical field of study is governmental accounting. This is brought forward under Rule 0020-05.048 that says CPE credit may be allowed for successful completion of exams for certified management accountant, certified information systems auditor, as well as other similar exams approved by the board. Credit will be awarded at a rate of 5 times the length of the exam taken and limited to 50% of the total CPE required under Rule 0020-05-.03. So we were asked to review and determine the eligibility in those specific technical fields to count as CPE, and the committee did vote to approve this request.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Is there a motion from the board to approve the committee's recommendation that we approve the CGFM exam as eligible for CPE credit?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Thank you. Is there any further comment or discussion? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
David Crenshaw,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert, John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Rob Vance,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Pam, are there any other items from your committee to report out?
No, that concludes our items.
Okay. Well, Pam, thank you to you and also to Janet and John and Gay and Judy for that committee's work. The next committee is Enforcement. That's chaired by Greg Gilbert, and I think it's fair to say that yesterday the committee thoroughly vetted the cases that were presented before it and arrived at recommendations. And so, Greg, I'll turn it over to you here.
Thank you, Kevin. And as first order of business, I would like to formally welcome our newest Enforcement Committee member, David Crenshaw. And we're blessed to have David on the committee with his knowledge, and appreciate your willingness to serve, David. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our Associate General Counsel, Maria Bush, and Wendy for their efforts in putting together all the material that we have so that we can effectively and maybe efficiently, I'm not sure that we always do this efficiently, but that's not Wendy's or Maria's fault, but efficiently review the cases. So we will continue to make efforts to get through those as quickly as possible. You have in your package a case and complaint report, and I will just remind you that this is informational in nature, and it is a detail on open complaints. It does not include complaints on the legal report. And there are 9 cases on the report, and 5 of those involve individual CPA licensees and 4 involve firms. And all 9 of those cases are in some form of monitoring. And just one other item that I'll note on the report is for the fiscal year 22, that is the fiscal year that began July 1st, 2021, we've had 24 complaints. And there is no action item for that report. Then I will move to the legal report. You should have received an updated legal report this morning. I know those in attendance have a hard copy, and I believe we submitted electronic copies to the other members. So there are 4 sections that we will need approval for, please. One is the consent agenda, and we had 6 cases under that. 3 of those we recommend letter of warning, 1 letter of instruction, 1 litigation monitoring, and that we close 1. So a total of 6 cases under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a motion to accept the committee's recommendations on the 6 cases in the consent agenda, cases numbers 1 through 6?
So moved.
We have a motion by Gay. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Is there any further comment or discussion on any of these 6 cases or the committee's recommendations? If not, we'll go ahead and call the roll on cases 1 through 6 with respect to adopting the committee's recommendations.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. And Greg, I'll turn it back to you.
Mr. Chairman, the next section is involves cases 7 through 15, and that is, of course, 9 cases, and there are varying recommendations regarding penalties. I will note that 8 of the cases deal with peer review in some form, and then 2 of those 8 cases that relate to peer review were referrals from the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors. So the committee recommends that the recommendations be approved.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Maria, go ahead.
Thank you. Larry had submitted a comment on number 14, and he was asking whether or not we should clarify that that $3,000 penalty is due to the prior violations in 2008. But I just wanted to clarify for Larry that this $3,000 penalty does not take into account, although it's an aggravating factor that there was prior discipline, the consent order doesn't have certain language in it that we would need. So that's not part of this. The prior discipline is, part of the aggravating factor, but we're not really taking the consent order into consideration, so we don't need to add that language.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Maria, and we'll just make sure that Larry's comfortable with that explanation.
Mentioned okay in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we're open to entertain a motion to adopt the committee's recommended proposed discipline for cases 7 through 15 in the proposed discipline section of the legal report.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion on any of these cases, numbers 7 through 15? Aaron, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. And Greg, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if it's acceptable to you, we will vote on cases 16 and 17 separately.
That's
These
fine.
are the 2 representation cases. Case number 16 involves acts discreditable under the Aicpa Code of Professional Conduct, and this is for violation of anti-discrimination laws under Title IX. The practitioner is also a CPA and attorney in North Carolina. North Carolina closed a similar complaint, citing that the matter was outside its jurisdiction, our legal counsel also believes that this matter is outside our jurisdiction, and so the recommendation is that we close the case with a letter of warning with recommendation to refer matter to the Aicpa for consideration, and respondent does state that he is a member of Aicpa.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Is there a motion to accept the committee's recommended discipline for case number 16?
So moved.
Thank you, Gay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a second. Is there any further comment or discussion on case number 16 and the recommended discipline? Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion with respect to case number 16?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you, Karen. The motion passes. And Greg, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. The final case is case number 17, and the complaint was failure to exercise due professional care involving tax services and some fraudulent activity. The complaint was previously in litigation, and we had been monitoring the case. The litigation has now been settled in favor of the respondent, and the complainant has agreed to pay respondent $20,000 in damages and has asked the board to drop the complaint as all matters have been resolved. And our recommendation is that we close the case.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, Robert. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, Gay. So we have a motion and a second to accept the committee's recommended proposed discipline to close. Is there any further comment or discussion? Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion with respect to case number 17?
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
David Crenshaw.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
John Griesbeck.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Rob Vance.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry votes aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. And Greg, are there any other items from the Enforcement Committee?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and also thank the other members of the committee, Larry and Gay and David, as well as Robert. Appreciate the service on the committee and the thorough vetting that was engaged in yesterday. And to echo Greg's comments, appreciate Wendy and staff's help with respect to these cases as well. We'll move then to the Executive Committee. And essentially in our committee yesterday, Wendy overviewed for us the fiscal year-to-date fiscal 22 financial results for the Board of Accountancy. And Wendy, do you have any additional comments that you'd like to share today with respect to the financial reports or status?
I'll just do a quick highlight of revenues and expenditures.
That'd be great.
So in your packet, you had the net position statement, which shows information through November 30 of the current fiscal year, showing revenues at $231,415 and expenses at $347,428 with a deficit of $116,000. And of course, we have not seen the bulk of our renewals by the end of November, so we will catch up after December and January revenue posts. We did note yesterday a slight, being a little behind. That in the prior 2 years we had been behind in revenue at this same point, and reflecting on the fact that we are now requesting listing of CPE credit, could be having CPAs wait later in the cycle to renew. But in the end, we're still seeing good renewal numbers and people complying with the process. And in general, I also went through just some comments on the current line items and any issues that seemed off, and we didn't have any comments yesterday. If there's any today, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions or comments for Wendy in the financial interim report? Thank you. I think that concludes the business of the executive committee, and just would like to welcome Assistant Commissioner Martin. Thank you for stopping by here. If you have any comments, you're welcome. If not, you're welcome to be spellbound by the proceedings here.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. I didn't want to interrupt. I was just coming back from some meetings over at the Hill and thought I'd pop in over here and at the Motor Vehicle Commission next door. So I know we have a couple new board members. Welcome. Just wanted to say hello and appreciate the continued work of this board and the relationship that we have.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner, and appreciate all the cooperation and help that you've had, particularly in terms of trying to work through the issues of a quorum and virtual and in-person meetings. So appreciate that very much.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We appreciate the board being here and appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the legislative update, and for that we'll turn to our legal counsel, Maria Bush.
Chairman, I do not have many updates as we're just getting started in session, and bill analysis and that whole process has not gotten into full effect yet, but I do have one update that Wendy sent over. It's on House Bill 1883, and it is relative to audits for the Division of Elections. So the Secretary of State's office under this legislation would conduct random forensic audits of a selected number of counties and voting machine vendors after each statewide November general election, and this would begin in 2024. So that's something that we're looking at. And then, did you want me to say about the standards? Okay. So right now there's language stating that the standards, it would be it's SSARS, and then Wendy noted that she thinks it's supposed to be SSAE, accountancy lingo.
So in that particular bill, which I also forwarded to Tscpa so they could take a look, but they're talking about forensic audits in accordance with SARS. So I think there's some mix up with the standards there, but I'm sure that they will take a look at that to make sure that's correct.
Okay.
As we go forward. And just so you all know, internally, if legislation is filed that affects our board specifically, it will come to Maria and I for review. So we have not seen anything that affects our specific chapter yet.
Thank you. Maria, any other items there from a legislative update?
That is all. Just to kind of go off what Wendy was saying as well, yeah, we are assigned if there's something that flags for Department of Commerce and Insurance, that comes to me, and then through all of the chains of command of legal and Wendy and the administration, and we are able to review and provide an analysis of how that bill would impact the board and the department. So it does get busy around this time.
Yep, I can only begin to imagine, particularly at the department-wide level, not just our board. So good luck to everybody involved there. Thank you, Maria. The next item on our agenda is just old and new business. And are there any items of old or new business that any board member would like to bring up? Greg?
Mr. Chairman, I have just one item, and I've mentioned this to Wendy, and one of our fellow Tennessee tax practitioners, CPA, who's actually a former chair of this board and, of course, a board member, discussed with me a couple of weeks ago an issue. He's been through 3, maybe 4 firm mergers, and his firm has 5, maybe 6 offices in Tennessee. And he was just wondering if we could revise the firm location renewal. I'm not calling that the right legal terminology, Wendy, but the firm renewal application. So I think if there were 6 offices, then he submitted 6 applications for renewal with accompanying schedules, and the schedules were all the same because their partners rotate among offices. And so his question really was, is there a more simple way? Could we use one form with the attachments, and then on that single form have all the information that would be pertinent to all of the offices? And so I'd given Wendy a heads up, and I doubt you've had time to research that, Wendy, because that just happened recently, but that is a request that he asked us to consider.
Marie and I actually talked about it a little bit on Friday with some law and rules kind of in front of us. The statute does require that each location obtain a permit and renew that permit. And part of that renewal requires them to submit all of that information. Owners, CPA employees, ownership breakouts, those types of things. So unless the statute's changed, we do have to get a firm permit for each office, and we do have to collect certain information as designated in statute. What I've seen a lot of large firms do is they create one document that encompasses all offices. So they would list all owners, and then maybe they would list their locations out and check which location they're assigned to. And they would use that same document for each firm permit renewal, which is fine with us. If it has more information than needed, that's fine. As board staff, we might be able to develop such a document that folks could use as a resource if that would maybe more helpful to them than to create something different for every firm permit renewal. Or if the board is interested in, a change in statute for some reason, we can take another route for that.
I don't think the member would want us to go to that effort to have the statute changed, but he was just really inquiring as to whether the information could be included on a single form.
Yes.
That would be for each office. Would still contain the same information, but just one submission instead of multiple submissions.
I'm really not sure how to achieve it with one submission. Because each permit is assigned a different number with a different application. And so the easiest way I can think of is to create one attachment that would just be used for each of the submissions. Does that make sense?
And I think you did that.
Okay.
And I've also talked with Karen about this morning before the board meeting, because he mentioned that Karen was extremely helpful in helping him comply and get this information in. But it could have been a situation, Karen mentioned a technical problem sometimes with uploading the forms, and it sounds like that could have been part of the issue.
And I will say that the platform that we use right now, the attachment process is a little different than you might be used to in other worlds of attaching documents. We will be updating our platform, I believe, later this year, and hopefully that aspect of it will be improved so that people aren't confused by the process to actually attach something.
Thanks, Craig. Are there any other items of old or new business to be brought before the board? If not, just an administrative item. For those that are here physically, please sign your paperwork for Karen before you leave, and leave that with her. For all of the board members that are either here physically or virtually, thank you for your attendance. We were able to meet. We secured the physical quorum that we needed since we cannot meet under any emergency rule at this point in time. So we were able to conduct our business as necessary. And David, again, welcome to the board. We're glad to have you. And we will go ahead and adjourn this morning's meeting. And everybody just travel home safely. And if you're at home, stay safe. So thank you.
Pam Church
is now exiting.